Here's my attempt to streamline a great French classic for the modern home kitchen. All the key traditional coq au vin elements are here: braised chicken, wine, pork lardons, mushrooms, and pearl onions. But the specifics are a little different, and dinner should be done in an hour and a half, mostly unattended time. First, the lardons. You could just chop up any form of bacon, but I like big, chewy hunks, which you cannot cut from thin little rashers. You need slab bacon. I cannot get slab bacon, but widely available here in the American South is salt pork, about 12 ounces or 350 grams. As the name implies, it is quite salty, but the salt will leach out into the sauce and will just account for that when seasoning at the end. Up to you if you want to cut the skin off. You might find it a little slimy in the finished dish, but I don't mind, and it'll be good for the sauce. It's full of collagen. I like my lardons to be big, thick cuboids. These might seem huge, but they will shrink in half during the cooking. And we'll get those started first in any reasonably big pan with a lid. Starting it on no heat. Pork goes in first, then we turn the heat on medium. Enough fat will melt out slowly that it can then fry in its own fat. That's going to take almost half an hour to get as crispy as I want it. That's fine, we'll just do our other prep now. A little flour on a plate, and coq au vin is traditionally made with big bone-in pieces of a tough old rooster. For me, about 6 boneless chicken thighs is far more convenient. Chicken thighs braise beautifully, and this is about 1.5 pounds of meat, or 0.7 kilos. You might want more chicken, but I like to have a higher proportion of the other stuff in my stew. Tossing it in flour is certainly traditional. This will make a nice brown crust that will help the sauce adhere to the chicken, and it will provide all of our thickening for the sauce as well. Traditionally, you marinate the chicken pieces in wine and mirepoix overnight. If that does anything, it's certainly unnecessary when dealing with these relatively small, tender pieces of the young chickens that we get in grocery stores. All right, now you would traditionally chop up and sauté some fresh mushrooms. I like to use 1 ounce of dried mushrooms for 3 reasons. 1, the flavor they give to stews is insanely strong. 2, I like the kind of chewy texture they have when rehydrated. And 3, they require 0 prep. You just throw them in the pot. One thing I might do is break up any big hunks. This would be untenably large after it rehydrates. Everyone says that you're supposed to steep dried mushrooms in hot water first, take them out, and then strain the water through a coffee filter before you use it. That gets rid of the grit, they say, the little bits of sandy dirt clinging to these. Do that work if you want to, but I don't. Maybe in something thin like a soup I would notice the grit, but in something thick like this, I just don't. It's a non-issue for me. I just throw them in. Alrighty, when your lardons are super crispy like that, you could fish them out with a slotted spoon and maybe dump out some of the fat, or you could just leave everything in there, push the pork to the side, and fry the chicken in the bacon fat. I'm turning up the heat a little bit. Yes, I'm totally crowding the pan. No, I do not care. I don't need to brown these quickly or particularly thoroughly, and covering the entire pan surface makes it virtually impossible for the fond underneath to burn and ruin my sauce. These took about 10 minutes to get a nice color on side A. Those might look a little sloppy and ugly, but it doesn't matter. They're going to fall apart and get covered in sauce before we eat them. When the second side has a little color, I will make a well in the center and fry a big squeeze of tomato paste. Right before it looks like it's going to burn, I'll deglaze with some red wine, which I happen to have an ample supply of thanks to the sponsor of this video, Bright Cellars. Yes, Adam finally got a wine sponsor. Bright Cellars is a monthly wine club for people who love wine and who maybe know a lot about wine, or maybe they don't know a lot about wine. You just go to the website, you take the quiz, you answer these questions that are designed to suss out what kind of flavors you like. I like dark chocolate and whiskey and grapefruit. You tell them how adventurous you are. Surprise me, I say. And then you tell them whether you like red or white. Contrary to popular belief, I almost always drink red, though I'll take a nice white here or there when the sun gets hot. They match you with some wine, and they deliver them to your house. Look at this. Cool stuff from all over the world. Stuff I probably never would have found on my own. And there's wine education cards to help me learn about what I'm drinking so I can better articulate what I like. Because you like me, I hope, Bright Cellars will give you 50% off your first 6-bottle box. Just follow my link in the description and take the quiz. You get half off your first box. I'm excited to try this Australian Shiraz. I like reds from very hot climates, but we're cooking French food, so I gotta use this Bordeaux, right? You could use anything. Wine goes in, and the key to cooking with red wine, in my opinion, is just to not use too much of it. I put in maybe a cup cup or 250 mils. We'll drink the rest with dinner. Scrape all the bits off the bottom of the pan, and then we'll get this chicken almost submerged in about another cup of water or chicken stock. If you used straight red wine, the sauce would be kind of bitter and overpowering by the end. Time for the dried mushrooms to go in, and I don't just dump them in, I lift them out of the package and drop them in. Maybe that leaves some of the grit behind, but again, I think that's a very overblown problem. I grind in some pepper, but no salt yet. The pork is super salty. We can taste for some additional seasoning at the end. Some dried herbs are a nice thing to add at this stage, and I'm using Herbes de Provence. That's a mixture of like half a dozen dried herbs. It tastes like France in a bottle to me, but I don't think you should buy it just for the purposes of making this recipe. Use whatever herbs you've got. Thyme, rosemary, oregano, it's all fine. That's maybe a heaped teaspoon I put in there. Stir that up, lower the heat to a simmer, and cover. It'll be done in like an hour, whenever the chicken is soft to your liking. Maybe halfway through, you might consider taking the lid off. It depends how much liquid you first put in and how thick you want your sauce at the end. I usually like to evaporate off some water toward the end. Just remember, the sauce will also thicken as it cools, and cool it off we will by dumping in about a cup of pre-peeled frozen pearl onions. You can buy fresh onions and peel them yourself. I do that sometimes, but this is insanely easy, and they're already lightly cooked. We just have to thaw them in the hot sauce. Traditionally, you would saute these in a pan first, get some color on them, and maybe deglaze with a little wine or port, but that would require dirtying another pan, and by the time they're all covered in this strongly flavored sauce, I'm not sure that I could tell the difference. I'll just cover that up to help the onions thaw. The traditional side, or a traditional side, would be dried egg noodles, which I absolutely love. A 12-ounce bag, about 350 grams for this much stew. I'll just boil them in salted water for as long as the package says, about 10 minutes. Now's when you taste for seasoning. I put in a pinch of salt and a little hit of vinegar. Rice vinegar is my all-purpose vinegar, but it could be anything. Vinegar just freshens up the flavor of long-cooked dishes. Be very careful as you're stirring anything into this. That chicken is very soft, and I don't want it to shred. You can already see it shredding a little bit there. Drain off the noodles. I'll melt some butter in there, and if you've got some green for garnish, some fresh parsley or fresh tarragon, I think it's kind of nice to put that in the noodles instead of the stew. It just adds another dimension to the noodles, and it makes them look pretty. On the plate they go. Very carefully slide on some of that very tender chicken and top with the sauce and the assorted other bits. If you left all the bacon fat in there like I did, you might see some of it leak out like that on the plate, but I'm not complaining. You got to pour yourself a big glass of the remaining Bordeaux or whatever wine you used. You can see those braised thighs just melt when you cut into them. Breast meat would be kind of chalky. I absolutely love those big, chewy pork lardons, but if you only had tiny bits of bacon strips in there, it'd still be very nice. And look at those cute little onions. Of all the things I've cooked for videos lately, this is the one that made my wife the happiest.
It tasted like being in a cottage in the French countryside.